start with a new topic, principles of prehistoric archaeology. So, if we split apart this word, archaeology means the study of human history via material remains such as artifacts, architecture, fossils, and prehistoric is the period before the advent of written records or before the advent of writing. So, in that way, prehistoric archaeology is the study of human society before the advent of written records. So, it is a field that relies on interpretation of material remains such as artifacts, tools, excavations, structures, burials, and environmental evidence. And all of them, the study of all those material remains, they are there to reconstruct past human behavior because the writing is not there. Now, prehistory, it refers to period of human history before the advent of written records, before the writing started. So it encompasses vast expanse of time from the emergence of early hominins. So hominin here means all of the species that resemble human, that include species from Australopithecines to Homo habilis to Homo erectus to archaic Homo sapiens and then Homo sapiens. And this prehistory, it covers the period from Australopithecines to the development of writing system. And this development of writing, it varies by region. So in Mesopotamia, we the earliest advent of writing started here around 3200 BC. Then in Indus Valley civilization, in Harappan civilization, it started around 2600 BC, and in Mesoamerica it started around 1200 BC. Now, the subdivision of prehistory. The first subdivision is the Stone Age. Again, prehistory is the study of human culture, human evolution, human society, the society in which written records are not available. So we are going to study about all these Stone Ages, and we all know that by the finding of the first written records, which is around 3000 BC, and prehistory, it started from Australopithecines, that is around 3.3 million years ago. So in that long time, our hominin stock has been evolving without any facilities of writing. So the Stone Age, the first of which is Paleolithic, that is Old Stone Age, that started from 3.3 million years ago to 10,000 BC. This period of hominin evolution, it includes Australopithecus, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and early Homo sapiens. And the tool industry associated with this Stone Age are Oldowan, Acheulean, and Mousterian industries. And this period was characterized by hunting, gathering, and early form of fire use, and some form of symbolic behavior and cave art are also found in Lasso and Altamira. Now the second came Mesolithic, which is the Middle Stone Age that started around 10,000 BC and ended around 8,000 BC. This Middle Stone Age, it was an age of transition from totally nomadic existence to some form of sedentary lifestyle. So this transition, it held in the first form from hunting gathering to food production. The tools were also became somehow sophisticated. Microlithic tools were there. It means small tools. Some form of domestication of plants and animals also started. And we have the earliest example of settled communities in Natufian culture in the Levant. Next comes the Neolithic age that started around 8000 BC to 3300. And as the name suggests, Neolithic, the new Stone Age, which has been called the first revolution of mankind by Gordon Childe. So this period is characterized by full-scale agriculture, permanent settlement, sedentary lifestyle, full-scale domestication, and even development of early proto-writing. And the examples are Chattel-Hayuk, Mehergad, and the tools also became more polished and sophisticated. pottery, textile, and social stratification also developed. Then comes the Chalcolithic, the Copper Age, that started from 3300 BC to the 2000 BC, and this was the transitional phase between Neolithic and the Bronze Age. Here, metal tools, some form of metal tools, metal tool use was introduced, and we have also example of early urban centers such as Indus Valley, Mesopotamia, Egypt. Then came the Bronze Age, and here the use of bronze tools started, which hark back the arrival of urban civilizations such as Harappa, Mesopotamia, Egypt. Trade networks and monumental architecture, they also developed along with earliest form of proto-writing such as cuneiform hieroglyphs. Then comes the Iron Age that started 1200 BC to 600 BC. Here, there comes the widespread use of iron tools and weapon, and the arrival of weapon. It also led to formation of large state and organized warfare. Then come the development of full-fledged writing system transitioning to proto-history. Now let's talk about the difference between prehistory and proto-history. So prehistory, as I've explained, it refers to the period of human history before the advent of writing. So शुरू से लेकर अभी तक, since the beginning, around 3.3 million years to development of writing. And earliest record हमारे पास जो है, it is around 3000 or 3200 BC from Mesopotamia. So इस बीच का जो time है, when we are reconstructing the human behavior, the human culture, without help of any writing system, all of this phase, it is known as prehistory. In contrast, protohistory, it is a transitional period where society had some form of writing, but their records, they are remain undeciphered. जैसे इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन की बात करते हैं, तो this civilization, it also a past society where we are trying to reconstruct a society. और ऐसा नहीं है कि we do not have any evidence of writing. इंडस वैली सील से इंडस वैली जो राइटिंग हीरोग्लिफ्स हैं, जो कुनेइफॉर्म राइटिंग्स हैं, we have found it, but this writing has not been deciphered so far. And the other example are that they are society where some form of writing is there, but we get an idea about their civilization by comparing it with the material remains of other civilization. So ये difference है prehistory and protohistory का. Then the second difference, in prehistory there are no written records, and the whole knowledge about that society, the reconstruction of that knowledge, it is solely from archaeological evidence such as artifacts, tools, bones, cave paintings, and structures. On the other hand, in protohistory, although the reconstruction is also done by archaeological evidences, but along with that, external written records from nearby or neighboring literate civilization, they also provide additional information about the culture. So again, in protohistory, we are also trying to reconstruct the society. Let's take an example of Indus Valley civilization. So we are trying to reconstruct that society by the presence of all the archaeological evidence. But we have the evidence of some form of writing. We have writing on the seal, we have writing in form of motifs, but so far we have not been able to decipher it. So other than it, there may be other civilizations such as Minoan civilization. So such civilization, because of absence of any external written records, we get to understand them via the neighboring civilization. So this is the second difference. Now the example of prehistory is Paleolithic age. So in that age, where early human like Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, they relied on stone tools, but we know that they did not have any working use of written language. Even Neolithic culture, those of Europe, Asia, and Africa, it also fall under prehistory because Neolithic culture, even though it advanced on many other parameters, still it lacked writing. Now, when we consider the example of protohistory, so Indus Valley civilization, it takes the prominent position because we have found a script and evidence, but this script it has not been deciphered so far. Similarly, Minoan civilization they use a linear A script, which is also remain undeciphered. Then another example of proto-history is the Vedic period of Indian subcontinent. So in during the Vedic period, we have working evidence of transmission of oral knowledge, transmission of knowledge of Vedas and Smritis. But most of this knowledge it was transmitted orally, and it was written down much later. So the Rig Veda also come under proto-history. Now the final difference: prehistory ends when civilization develop a writing system. So the prehistory that we are considering, it ended around 3200 BCE when we have first deciphered knowledge of writing system in Mesopotamia. Whereas proto-history it ends when the writing is deciphered or widely used. So Indus Valley civilization it still comes under proto-history, and this period will end only when Indus Valley civilization script is deciphered. Now let's take a look at key principles of prehistoric archaeology. The first one is stratigraphy and context. So stratigraphy it is based on law of superposition. Law of superposition means layering one object over another. So this will be layer 2, layer first, layer 2, layer 3, and layer 4. So this layering it is known as law of superposition, and it says that the in the undisturbed layers the oldest deposit they would be found at the bottom. So L1 would be the oldest and L4 will be the youngest. So this principle of stratigraphy, it is especially used in case of excavation of mounds, because with time, when a particular site is left untouched, तो उस पे because of geographical process and various erosional and depositional feature, वहाँ पे layer जम जाती है, especially of bioorganic matter, soil की हो गई, the sediments brought by river, या जितने भी जो भी ये फिर depositional features है सब, तो उसकी वजह से with time in a few thousand years a mound is created. अब जब उस mound को when we excavate, so this principle of stratigraphy it comes into picture, that the oldest layer it will be at the bottom. Now the discovery of Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where Mary and Louis Leakey they unearthed early hominin fossils and stone tools and established a relative timeline of early human technological development. So this excavation of Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania it stands as the first example of use of stratigraphy. Now the limitation of stratigraphy are that because of many natural and human activities such as soil erosion, bioturbation, which means disturbance by animals, and various agricultural practices, they can also complicate they can alter layers and complicate dating accuracy. So this is the limitation of stratigraphy. Now the second principle, typology and seriation. So typology it is the systematic classification of artifacts based on sheer characteristics such as shape, material, function, and manufacturing technique. So meaning of this is, uh, let's take example. We have found three different potteries from three or four different places: A, B, C, and D. Now we have the when we look at the pottery, we found that all of them, they are black and red wares. Means the color that is used for in these potteries, it is black and red. So because of that, we have found that all of these pottery that have been found in different places or different layers, they belong to same culture, because of because they all of them, they share the same characteristic. So this simple example, it can tell you how typology works. That when artifacts, they have many shared characteristics, many similar characteristics in number, in terms of shape, material, function, and even manufacturing techniques. So we classify those artifacts, and when similarities are found out, such classification becomes very easy. And this system, it was developed by Oscar Montelius, that allow archaeologists to identify cultural pattern and technological progress. Now let's take another example, so that this whole concept becomes easy to understand. So the another example of shared characteristic, it can be around material. So all of we know, when we studied the various phases of stone ages, from Paleolithic to the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. Now this classification of Iron Age, when we have given a particular timeline that is attached to when it started and when it end. So this classification of timeline, it is based on this shared characteristic, क्योंकि उस particular timeline के पहले there wasn't any widespread use of iron, or even the same thing can be applied to bronze, even to copper age, क्योंकि इन सब को particular timeline दिए हुए हैं, और timeline इसीलिए है because before that time we do not have any widespread evidence of widespread use of that particular metal. और इसी कारण से इंडियन सबकॉन्टिनेंट और इवन वर्ल्ड ओवर जहाँ जहाँ भी जो आर्टिफैक्ट्स, पर्टिकुलर आर्टिफैक्ट जैसे कॉपर आर्टिफैक्ट्स मिले हैं, तो देन वी प्लेस्ड ऑल ऑफ देम इनटू Chalcolithic age. And because of the timeline and the subsequent uh, dating methods, we have come to have an idea from where Chalcolithic started and where it ended. Now, some key example. The first, stone tool typology. So older one tools that started from 2.6 to 1.7 million years ago. Here, all of the stone tools they were found were of simple core and flake tools. So यहाँ पे classification देख सकते हैं कि इस इतने बड़े टाइम स्केल में भी जितने भी टूल्स मिले हैं, all were about the same characteristic. They had same simple core and all of were flake tools. Flake tool means एक बड़े पत्थर को by chiseling it we take out the chips. जैसे ये एक बड़ा पत्थर है, then by taking example of all the one industry in which one stone was used as an anvil and other was used as a hammer. So by this hammering technique, some chips were taken out, and these chips they were bound to some harpoons, spears, and hence they were known as flake tools. So this industry, it was attributed to the Homo habilis. Now the Acheulean hand axes. So here bifacially work stone tools. Again the same technique. Herein the stone on stone technique, a kind of hammering technique, where the same chip that we have found, उसको फिर से you make it bifacial, कि सिर्फ एक ही end नहीं, दोनों end we have sharpened them. Now both the sharpened faces, they are hafted on any throwers. It may be a spear, it may be a wooden shaft, and hence we have bifacial stone tools. And this technique, it is characterized by Acheulean industry and used by Homo erectus. So इस एग्जाम्पल से समझ गए होंगे कि how typology works. Now the second example, ceramic typology. Ceramic जो भी all the tools, mostly the artifacts of daily use, such as pottery. So Jomon culture, Japan के अंदर, it started from the 40,000 year and ended around 300 BC. So ये देख सकते हैं, it is almost a time of 14,000 years. So ये characteristic how it was placed or came to have such a wide time, such a wide expanse of time, क्योंकि इस पूरे टाइम में, इस टाइम से लेकर इस टाइम तक जितनी भी पॉटरी मिली, all of them they were of same characteristics, same shared characteristic, that is called mark pottery, and it is one of the oldest known ceramic tradition of Japan. Now, the second example, bell beaker culture. In Europe, it started around 2800 and ended around 1800 BC. And this culture is characterized by distinctive bell shaped pottery that is linked to early metallurgy and trade. So, these are prominent example of typology. Now let's take example of seriation. Seriation, a relative dating technique, it was pioneered by Flinders Petrie when he analyzed Egyptian pottery sequence. So, in this method of seriation, chronological sequences are established based on changes in artifact style or frequency over time. So both typology and seriation, they are related. Typology, it places artifacts based on their sheer characteristic. तो जैसे जापान के अंदर इस पूरे वास्ट एक्सपेंस ऑफ टाइम में जहाँ जहाँ भी पॉटरी मिली, all of them were code marked. So all of them they were placed into a single culture because of shared characteristic. Seriation में it looks for the changes कि कॉर्ड मार्क पॉटरी से नेक्स्ट न्यू स्टाइल पॉटरी कैसे चेंज हुई. सो जैसे ही वो चेंजेस नज़र आते हैं, वैसे ही जैसे ही वो आर्टिफैक्ट स्टाइल या फ्रीक्वेंसी इट चेंजेस, a particular chronological sequence is given by seriation. Example of which are the first Egyptian pottery seriation done by Flinders Petrie. So he used seriation to establish the relative chronology of pre-dynastic Egyptian burial based on pottery style, and it was one of the first successful application of seriation. So एक बार इस एग्जाम्पल का एलेबरेशन देख लेते हैं, एक्सप्लेनेशन देख लेते हैं. So here seriation is about giving chronological sequence. Chronological sequence means giving timeline, a particular timeline. और वो timeline, how does it is established? It is established by looking for changes in the styles of artifacts. So let's say एक लंबे टाइम तक जितने भी एक्सकेवेशन में पॉटरी मिली है, इट इज़ ब्लैक एंड रेड वेयर. नाउ आफ्टर सम टाइम जितनी भी एक्सकेवेशन हैं उनमें जो पॉटरी है, इट इज़ बेल बीकर. So now you can see this work of seriation into play कि जिस टाइम तक ये वर्क ये पर्टिकुलर चल रही थी, ब्लैक एंड रेड चल रही थी, दिस बिकॉज ऑफ शेयर कैरेक्टरिस्टिक वो पूरा टाइमलाइन, वो पूरा जो समय है, इट वॉज प्लेस्ड अंडर टाइपोलॉजी ऑफ ब्लैक एंड रेड वेयर. लेकिन जैसे ही ये चेंज हुआ, जैसे ही इस आर्टिफैक्ट की स्टाइल में चेंज हुआ, एंड उसके बाद जितने भी एविडेंसेस हैं वी फाउंड वर ऑफ बेल बीकर कल्चर. सो हियर this transition phase, this change, it is given a timeline by seriation. Let's take another hypothetical example. So after some time, the same bell beaker culture, it gave way to let's take example, red and blue culture, red and blue pottery. So here this transition कि कुछ समय बाद जो पॉटरी मिली वो सब रेड एंड ब्लू है, बेल बीकर एंड ब्लैक एंड रेड, all of them they have totally vanished. So here, by seriation method, we found that around 1000 BCE, black and red ware, its use, it got reduced and it gave way to bell beaker culture. Then around 500 BCE, we found that bell beaker pottery is no longer there and it has been replaced by red and blue culture. And this is how seriation works. और फ्लिंट पैट्री ने जो इजिप्शियन डिनेस्टीज हैं उनके बरियल से ये सीरिएशन मेथड यूज़ किया, इस्टेब्लिश किया कि अलग अलग डिनेस्टिक बरियल में अलग अलग पॉटरी मिली, अलग अलग स्टाइल की पॉटरी मिली। तो उस हिसाब से उस पता चला कि यस, इन 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 इतने पर्टिकुलर टाइम तक, इस टाइम से लेकर इस टाइम तक ए टू बी एक पर्टिकुलर पॉटरी। देन फिर सेकेंड डिनेस्टी के आते ही पॉटरी स्टाइल इट गॉट चेंज, फिर थर्ड के आते ही पॉटरी स्टाइल चेंज। सो दिस वॉज हाउ द सीरिएशन मेथड, द फर्स्ट सक्सेसफुल एप्लीकेशन, was used. Now the second example, American gravestone seriation given by James Deeds. So he analyzed New England gravestone from 17th to 19th century, and he found that gravestone motifs they evolved from death's head. So जो फर्स्ट जो ओल्डेस्ट मोटिफ उसको मिला है ग्रेव स्टोन मोटिफ मीन्स, जैसे इंडिया में हम लोग ज़्यादातर हम या तो हमारा जो बरियल होता है सिंपल बरियल विदाउट एनी ग्रेव स्टोन, और या फिर वी यूज़ funeral pyres. But the Christian, they bury their dead and erect a gravestone on which उस पे नाम लिखा होता है, ठीक है, काइंड ऑफ यूलॉजी उसके रिलेटिव्स के द्वारा कि कब जन्म कब मृत्यु, एंड फिर उसके बारे में कुछ। सो ये ग्रेव स्टोन मोटिव्स हैं, दे ऑल्सो इवॉल्व, द कल्चर, द पैटर्न ऑफ दीज आर्टिफैक्ट्स ऑल्सो इवॉल्व, and it was studied by James Deed, and he found that the oldest motif were of death's head, which was because of Puritan influence. Then gravestone motif, they were replaced by cherub, so it showed the Christian influence. And then finally, around 19th century, the gravestone motif, they started having pictures of willow and urn, and it was mostly associated with neoclassicism. So this was how he employed the seriation technique to change in the style of artifacts. Now the limitations. So both typology and seriation, they assume that cultural change is gradual and sequential, क्योंकि the timeline according to shared characteristic and timeline according to the change in styles, both will be applicable only when the change is gradual. But what if it is not? Because it is not always the case. Rapid technological advancement or external influence, they can also disrupt expected patterns. So this is one of the main limitations of typology and seriation. Now, the third principle, chronology and dating methods. The first one of which is relative dating. So relative dating, as the name suggests, it is used to date the artifact in relation to other artifacts or in relation to other established dates. So ये वाली टेक्निक, जैसे we found a certain black and red pottery. Now, by carbon dating of the similar artifacts found in other areas, let's say A is a place in Europe and B is a place in America. Now, when we found black and red ware in America, then we looked for the other precedents and we found that the same black and red ware, they were found in Europe around 3000 BCE. So because of this relation, we gave it a relative dating. So this is how the mechanism of relative dating it is employed. and it includes stratigraphy, seriation, and fluorine dating, which provide chronological sequence without assigning specific date. So specific dates are not assigned. Fluorine analysis, which is applied to the pill-down man hawks, it helps expose the forgery by revealing inconsistency in the fossils' fluorine absorption levels. So फ्लोरीन एनालिसिस, सो इस प्रिंसिपल का होता है कि हमारी बॉडी जो है इट एब्जॉर्ब फ्लोरीन, द मेटल दैट इज़ फाउंड इन वाटर. सो हमारी बॉडी में वो फ्लोरीन कितना है उसके हिसाब से, एंड हाउ दैट फ्लोरीन इट हैज़ डिग्रेडेड, उसके हिसाब से पता चलता है कि हाउ ओल्ड द आर्टिफैक्ट्स और हाउ ओल्ड द फॉसिल इज. एंड पिल डाउन मैन hawks. This was a controversial fossil, which was a kind of forgery. So this forgery it was revealed by analysis the fluorine absorption level. Anyway, जब हमारा रिलेटिव डेटिंग और नेक्स्ट टॉपिक आएगा डेटिंग मेथड्स का, we will talk about in much detail. Now the absolute dating methods, they assign specific dates to artifacts and sites. The first principle of which is radiocarbon dating C14. This method it was developed by Willard Libby in 1940, and it can ascertain the dates of organic material up to 50,000 years old. And this was instrumental in dating the Lasso cave paintings. The second principle, potassium argon dating, it is used to date volcanic materials, and it played a key role in determining the age of early hominin fossils in East Africa, especially the Australopithecines. A third method, dendrochronology, the tree ring method, it is effective for dating wooden remains. Now the limitations. Radiocarbon dating it is effective only for organic remains and can be affected by contamination. Whereas the limitation of dendrochronology that it requires preserved wood, and it is also geographically limited. And the potassium argon dating method it also has certain limitation, the same limitation. Now the fourth principle, ethnoarchaeology and experimental archaeology. So ethnoarchaeology is the study of living culture to understand how behaviors are reflected in the archaeological record. So by observing modern society, archaeologists they can infer how prehistoric people made and used artifacts, organize the settlements, and engage in daily activity. The meaning is simple. Ethnoarchaeology it is the study of present society to reconstruct the past society. So जैसे आज के टाइम में हम पर्टिकुलर पॉटरी क्यों यूज़ करते हैं उससे इस्टेब्लिश होता है कि पास्ट सोसाइटी है वो लोग पॉटरी का यूज़ किस तरह करते थे. सो इट्स काइंड ऑफ रिवर्स मैकेनिज्म. मॉडर्न सोसाइटी को स्टडी करके we get an idea of how artifacts were used, how people lived, and how people organized the settlement in the past society. And examples are Louis Bainford and Nunavut Eskimos. So Bainford he studied Nunavut, an indigenous Alaskan hunting society, to understand how hunter-gatherers butchered and discarded animal remains. So he studied the contemporary Alaskan community to study how the uh, hunter-gatherers of Paleolithic age they butchered and discarded animal remains at that time. And his observation it helped interpret archaeological bone assemblages and distinguish between hunting and scavenging activity in prehistoric site. So his observation they have been arrived at by studying the modern society. Now the second example, Richard Gold and Australian Aborigines. So he studied Australian Aboriginal groups and that made and used stone tools. So by studying the present Australian Aboriginal groups, he observed that some stone tools were discarded after minimum use. Now, the next principle, experimental archaeology, and it is also one of the method that is used to reconstruct the past society. But this reconstruction, it is done by recreating the past technology, the tools and activity to understand how prehistoric people lived. So this is a kind of a simulation archaeology, when the same tools that were used by the prehistoric people, they are being recreated, and hence their effects are studied. So first example is of a flint knapping and stone tool replication. So researcher, they have replicated older one Acheulean and Mousterian tools to understand how early hominin made and used them. So this is again replication and simulation. And these studies that show that hand axes and flakes, they were used for butchering, wood cutting and hide processing. And the second example, Earthsea is the Iceman's copper axe. So Earthsea is a mummified corpse that was found in Alps, and his copper axe was recreated, Earthsea's copper axe, to test its efficiency, and found that his axe, it could chop down trees as effectively as modern steel axe. Now the limitation. So ethnoarchaeological studies, they rely on modern analogies in which may not fully reflect past behavior due to cultural evolution. So modern जो society का behavior है, if we take it as an example to study, to observe how the past people behave, but the conclusion we arrive at, it may not be true, it may not fully reflect the past lives, because the culture, it has evolved. If we are studying the modern society of 2025, to study how Australopithecines, they lived in East Africa, so we have the time gap of around 3.3 million years, and in that time the culture, it has evolved manifold. So first, correct observation or correct conclusion may not be drawn, and the second limitation of experimental archaeology, it is constrained by inability to perfectly recreate prehistoric condition. So experimental archaeology, which is about replication or recreation of the prehistoric tools. Now the modern times, they have changed. So those prehistoric conditions, they may not be recreated, even if we successfully recreate older one or Mousterian tools, but we do not live in the condition, we do not have the same environmental condition that were present in prehistoric times. Now the next principle, interdisciplinary approach. So prehistoric archaeology, it integrates multiple disciplines to reconstruct past environment and human adaptation, that include paleoanthropology, which studies human evolution through fossil and skeletal analysis. So discovery as the Manisi site in Georgia, it provides critical evidence of early hominin migration out of Africa. The second principle, the second field that is involved, it is zooarchaeology, which examines animal remains to understand diet, hunting practice, and domestication. So the domestication of dogs, which is evidenced by the remains at Bonn Oberkassel site, it highlights early human-animal relationship. The third one is geoarchaeology, which investigates geological process affecting site formation and preservation. So the study of sediments at Châteauhuac, it provides insight into Neolithic urbanism. And finally, the last field, paleoenvironmental studies, which uses pollen analysis and sediment analysis to reconstruct past climates. Now, the next principle, cultural and technological evolution. So prehistoric archaeology, it traces human cultural evolution through major technological shifts. First one is Paleolithic, which was characterized by hunter-gatherer society, early stone use and symbolic behavior. Then second, Middle Stone Age, it was a transitional period that intensified food collection and early form of domestication. Example, Natufian culture, the Neolithic culture, the first revolution, which was marked by agriculture, pottery production, permanent settlement with sites like Göbekli Tepe, and finally the Bronze and Iron Ages, which introduced the use of metals leading to technological advancement and complex society. Now let's have a look at the overall limitations of prehistoric archaeology. The first one is, as the name suggests, the lack of written records. So all of the interpretation, they are based entirely on material culture, which may be ambiguous and uncertain, and we do not have direct account of belief, social structure, individual identity, religion, what people talk to each other, the forms of communication, language. We do not have any evidence for that. Now the second limitation is about preservation issue, because organic materials, they decay over time, and this decay, it leaves gap in the archaeological records, and there may be some climates such as tropical climate, humid climate, they are also less favorable for preservation. So that's why we do not have a lot of hominin remains in India, because India, it is a semi-tropical country, and India, to the south of Vindhya mountain, it comes under humid and tropical climate, and because of that, animal remains, they decay very fast. Now the next limitation, dating challenges. So absolute dating, radiocarbon luminescence, they have limitations for very old sites, and relative dating, they rely on assumption about stratigraphy, and this may be disturbed by many factors. Now the next limitation are about ethical and cultural sensitivity. So excavation and handling of human remains, it raises ethical issue, because not all the people, they allow such exhumation. Exhumation means to excavate the human remains of buried ancestor, and especially indigenous community, they oppose such research on ancestral remains because of the reverential attitude towards their ancestors. Then finally, the last limitation, it is about interpretation bias, because the early interpretation were Eurocentric and often disregarded alternate cultural perspective. And this over-reliance on technological determinism, which means over-reliance on technology, they may oversimplify prehistoric life, and there may be many factors, many cultural parameters, many aspects of the lives of prehistoric people that we may not be aware of, and we may be underestimating in the name of technological determinism. Now, major discoveries and case studies in prehistoric archaeology. The first one is Olduvai Gorge, Tanzania, which was discovered by Mary and Louis Leakey, and it produced the earliest hominin fossils of Homo habilis and Paranthropus boisei. And this discovery also highlighted the earliest stone tool used, which is the older one in the industry, place situated around 2.5 million years. Then Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, it has one of the oldest known temple complex, placed around 9600 BCE, and it challenges the notion that agriculture preceded complex society, because 9000 BC, a time of Paleolithic age, in which there wasn't any known evidence of agriculture and domestication flourishing in any part of world, and still the people of Göbekli Tepe, they had one of the oldest known temple complex. So we can see the contrast here. No agriculture, but yet we had temple, which is a parameter that justify the existence of complex society. The next discovery, the Denisova case, Russia. So here, the remains of Denisovans, a distinct hominin groups were found, and the DNA analysis it showed interbreeding with Neanderthal and modern human. And most of the society of Afro-Eurasia, they also contain some genes that are ancestral to the Denisovans. Now the next case study is about Çatalhöyük, Turkey. It was a Neolithic proto-city placed around 7500 BC, and it provided insight into early sedentism, social organization, ritual practice, and one of the famous Neolithic sites. Now the notable scholars in prehistoric archaeology. So first, Christian Thompson, he developed the 3-age system stone, bronze, iron. Then Louis Bineford, he introduced processual archaeology, which is a scientific approach to cultural evolution. Marian Louis Leakey discovered Olduvai Gorge, and V. Gordonchild coined the term Neolithic Revolution. Now, these are the questions that were asked by UPSC. Uh, and finally, the conclusion. So, prehistoric archaeology it reconstructs human prehistory using material evidence, scientific techniques, and comparative studies. Its core principle includes stratigraphy, typology, seriation, dating methods, and interdisciplinary approaches, providing a structured framework from studying past society. And even though it has its own limitation, advances in technology such as DNA analysis and geospatial modeling, they continue to refine our understanding of early human evolution and cultural development. So this is it. Thank you very much, and kindly subscribe the channel.